Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us for the Well-Rounded Musician. This is, I believe, our 7th installment. Is that right, Alexa?
Oh, yes.
7th installment. We're going to hear from Alexa in just a minute, but I just want to say hi to everybody and to thank you all for continuing to support us here at Jazz at Lincoln Center. We're so grateful. For those of you who don't know, my name is Chloe. I am the video editor here, but am sort of taking on another role as host for some of these classes, which is lots of fun. I'm happy to be here with you all. Alexa's going to do her lesson, which today will be part 2 of internalizing repertoire. And after that, she and I will open it up to Q&A. When that time comes, I'll jump back in and explain how to ask a question. For now, feel free to use the chat here in Zoom to talk to me or the comment section on Facebook. That all being said, I'll turn it over to Miss Alexa Tarantino. Enjoy, everybody.
Thank you, Chloe. Hi, everybody. Hope you are doing well. Happy Thursday. I cannot believe we are on episode 7 here. Wow. Sending good vibes to everybody. Hope you're staying safe and healthy. So if you were with us last week, we had internalizing repertoire part 1. And I think, I gave a lot of information in a short amount of time. So as usual, I'm going to review our 3 takeaways from last session and just keep going and finish it out. So this entire series has been sort of based around what does somebody, in my opinion, need to know diving into the freelance jazz world right now. Maybe not right now, specifically in COVID times, but in the general kind of tech world, what's happening in terms of social media and self-promotion and different types of avenues of gigs and revenue streams. So if you missed any episodes, we've had some really great topics and discussion. So feel free to reach out to me. Chloe is going to drop in the chat information where you can get in touch with me. I have a link tree with a whole bunch of stuff. And so if you missed anything or have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. So this whole internalizing repertoire series is a little bit more in depth in the musical stuff. So in terms of like theory and things like that. And if you have any questions, again, we will talk about them later on. And I'm looking forward to, after this week, sort of taking a new direction and bringing on some people to be in conversation with for some special guests. So hope you'll stick with us. So last week, our 3 takeaways from internalizing repertoire number 1, the number 1 was to list all the tunes that you know. And for me, I find that to be super helpful, especially when I'm just like out in a jam session setting, or if I'm working with students and I'm gonna accompany somebody on the piano or something like that. It just helps to know and gauge where you're at. Number 2, takeaway number 2, list the tunes you want to or feel that you need to know but don't. A lot of times I think we can easily practice what we're good at, what we're familiar with, and it's most important really for us to use that time to dig into what we could improve on. And then takeaway number 3 from last week was to chip away with this model, trying to focus on maybe 1 new tune at your pace, either per day, per week, whatever you have available to you, and make that schedule for yourself. A lot of us, we talked about in the first few episodes of this, we talked about getting your bios and resumes and practice routines and all of that together. And so if you can incorporate this into your routine, that's awesome. So from the beginning, the lesson was that the different steps that I take are to, 1, when you're learning a new tune, listen to as many versions as you can. Number 2, sing the melody and really get it down, whether you're a vocalist or not. Step 3, learn that melody on your horn by ear. Step 4, make the melody your own. And so as an example, I was playing Autumn Leaves and I just, kind of played it just straight up off the page and then embellished it a little bit more. So understanding how to make something your own, bring your own feeling, bring your own sound to it. Then step 5 was to learn the bass line of the tune that you're working with. So I guess I can just do a little bit of a quick recap here. So an example of me making the melody my own on Autumn Leaves might be then working on the bass line, which might be something like this. Okay, and that's after really looking at the theory and the voice leading and things. So you want to learn the bass line, even if it's just this. All right, and so then we talked about phrase models, meaning different chord changes and movements within a piece, whether it's a 2-5-1 or a 3-6-2-5-1, or perhaps some chords are moving stepwise. And we talked about really getting inside the arpeggios of the chords that you're working with, flipping those into different permutations, looking at the guide tones that make those chords fit together, and then learning the scales that relate to those chords. So now I'm going to move on and start tonight with 2-5-1 vocabulary, which is where we just left off last week. And 2-5-1 is the most common chord progression in jazz, and it's really important that we all feel, as performing musicians, well versed in this progression in all 12 keys. So, and I mean, this is something that you'll hear even if you're listening to the top 40, songs on the radio. This movement in music is very, 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 very important. So for me, as an example, I might go through my 2-5-1 arpeggios like this, doing my 1-3-5-7 ascending through a tune. Okay, and I think that's just about maybe where we finished last week. And I encouraged people from there to really work on expanding the permutations, testing yourself to flip those numbers around a little bit. So if somebody said to me, Alexa, can you play 3-1-5-7? That would sound like this. Okay, and if you're really into the numbers game, you would write out all the different permutations and just get familiar flipping things inside out. Again, because when we actually take a solo on the bandstand, we don't want to sound robotic or a little bit stiff, like we can only ever start chords from the root. Right, that's a little bit stiff. So we want to feel comfortable playing from any point in the chord. Okay, and so from there, I just want to add a couple of these other improvisational concepts that are really important to me that we did not have time for last week. So one thing from there, I'll look at that arpeggio shape of a 2-5-1. And then what I'll do is, to take it to the next step, I'll change it up a bit. I'll keep that first arpeggio there, and then on that 5 chord, I'll change it to make it a little bit of a descending line. Okay, and so if you are a student, if you're working on this jazz theory and improvisation stuff, I encourage you to grab a notebook, try to sketch some of this stuff out by ear. Last week I talked about how I love to transcribe, like on a park bench, on the airplane, on the train. I like to transcribe away from my horn. So since obviously I can't be there with you in person, writing things down and showing you, I would encourage you to, if you can, revisit this after if you're trying to pick out some things by ear and really get it down. And so then after that line, an example of just messing with some of these patterns, I could change the rhythm of that first bar. And I've already made that 2-5-1 feel a little bit less kind of stiff or cookie cutter. So now if I change the rhythm, just improvise some rhythms throughout that entire line without really changing the notes, I might get. Which is already feeling a little bit more natural. And so then other ideas to kind of shake things up a bit and move away from just emphasizing and outlining the chords and the arpeggios is to add an element like the bebop scale. And bebop scales, we've got 2 varieties of bebop scales. I mentioned this a little bit last week. We have the dominant bebop scale and our major bebop scale. And so for this example, on that 5 chord, maybe I'll do something like this. Okay, and so that was outlining that bebop scale right there on the F7. Okay, and then another idea is to think about adding, you know, it's just like if I say, I am hungry, that's a very basic form of a sentence. And then to elaborate on that might be, I woke up late this morning, so I missed breakfast, I am hungry. And so I added some like prefix information there into the main idea. So let's see, if I'm coming up with a little something to kind of enter into the real meat of my idea, I might get okay, so I kept that really middle to the end part of the line, but I added a little bit at the beginning. And that's just one of a million different things that you could do. So that was sort of a prefix addition. Maybe I'll go back to my original line and add something towards the end. So this might be more like, I am hungry because I ate all my food yesterday and didn't have time to go to the store. So I'm keeping the main idea, I am hungry, and I'm gonna add, you can see where my priorities are. I am hungry, I'm gonna leave that main idea right there. I'm gonna add something to the end of the phrase. Okay, so I'm adding some real classic diatonic bebop vocabulary. And this, I mean, you know, you're welcome to ask me questions about these lines that I'm adding, but the best place for you to really study them is through transcription. For me, I just played through those Charlie Parker Omnibook solos until I could sing them and play them. And I encourage that for all instruments, but really just transcribing absolutely as much as you can to focus on that articulation, focus on the time, focus on that swing feel. And so just to kind of tie this back to the whole idea of the well-rounded musician, while this is not a, you know, entrepreneurial lesson topic today, the whole idea is that, you know, you don't just get gigs because you have a pretty business card, because you've got a great website, because you have a really clean looking bio. Ultimately, the most important thing in developing your career as a freelance jazz musician, especially now, is how you play and leaving it all out on the stage as soon as you get out there, and leaving, you know, no room for questions, just that first impression being straight up, just fire. And so the most important thing is to be able to be in any of these situations, whether it's a jam session, whether it's working on a, you know, getting thrown in on a tune that you don't know, or getting thrown in on a tune that you maybe know. If you have a grasp on all of these 2-5-1s, which will undoubtedly be in those standards that you're playing, you will already be set up for success. And hopefully, the more that you train your ears, the more that you transcribe, it's just going to come more and more naturally to you. So I hope that was a somewhat of a, you know, an understandable description of adding a prefix and adding a suffix to the meat of a line. Again, that little prefix idea, a little bit of a run-in to that main idea, and then again the suffix idea. And adding a little bit of extra stuff there. Okay, and so after the bebop scale, another really popular scale to look at is the half-whole diminished scale. And again, if you want to get really, really, really deep into the theory of things, or if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. It sounds like this, which Chloe actually requested that I play some funky sounding scales tonight, so I'm happy to provide for our fabulous Jalk video producer, Chloe. Okay, so that's the Chloe scale for today. And so let's see, if I'm playing in that same key, a 2-5-1 in B flat, then maybe I'll do a little bit something like this. Okay, so I'm adding on that 5 chord, I'm using this particular sound now. And if I were you, I would just do the same exact thing. I'm really, you know, this is just kind of level 2. You know, I started really emphasizing the bebop scale, and now I'm moving on to a more complex scale. I'm moving on to the half-whole diminished scale, and I'm really focused on that 5 chord. I'm trying to figure out how many different things can I lay on that 5 chord, because you just want to have all of these different colors, all of these different tools in your toolbox to grab. And it's not just about, you knowing them and being able to play them on your instrument. When you're on the bandstand, oftentimes I'll be standing there and the pianist will do something so cool and I have no idea what it is, but I can pick out maybe just a few pitches. And like, maybe I couldn't put a name to the chord right then and there, but pick out a few pitches or see, okay, that sounds a little bit like this type of scale. You want to be able to have all of this knowledge in your back pocket so that when you're in live performance settings, you can kind of grab these things and respond to them in the moment in improvisation. So that's one example of the half whole diminished scale. And if I added a little bit of a prefix to there, okay, and if I added a little bit of a suffix to that, okay, and so you can probably tell I love to do lots of little turns and trills and things like that. And I just find that they're very, at least on the alto saxophone, they're very kind of true to that bebop style. Phil Woods and Dick Oates and Kenny Garrett and Sonny Stitt are some of my favorite alto players. So that's where that might come from. So that's the idea in terms of taking, we just went from all the way to okay, and just, obviously this is not something that happens overnight, but it's an idea. It's a way for you to look at things and sort of chip away slowly at different levels of your vocabulary. So if I can, encourage you to just assess where are you in terms of developing your vocabulary and how can you get to the level that you want to be at. Take a look and see, can I add some of these prefixes to my vocabulary? Is there something I can add in to make things a little bit less focused on that arpeggio? Maybe shake things up a bit. Can I end my phrases in a certain way that's unique to me? Can I end my phrases in a certain way, a la Charlie Parker on the Coco solo, or a la Dick Oates on a Dolphin Dance solo? Really analyze these solos and see how people are ending like the meat of their lines. So the biggest thing for me as an improviser, I really like to play very melody and theme based. So for me, a lot of people will ask like, oh, what do you think about playing out or playing outside the changes? How do you play out? And I actually have to give a big shout out to Steve Wilson. When I first moved to New York, I took a lesson with Steve Wilson, and he had sort of affirmed this idea that I had sort of been grasping for, which was that, as long as you, and I think Mulgrew Miller may have sort of imparted this on him as well, but it's if you really stay, if you play one idea that's really grounded in the harmony, and then play a similar idea, but you could take it, anywhere you want, and then bring it back to ground it in the harmony. I mean, it's like nobody's gonna say, oh, you went to the flat 2 and you weren't supposed to go to the flat 2. If you ground something and show people where you're at and take them on a little bit of a journey and then bring them back home, that's all that the listener really wants. And so, an example of that on a 2/5 might be. Okay, so I took this small idea. And then I resolved it back home. So I took a small 1, 2, 3, 5, the scale degrees on a chord, and I moved it through different key centers. And so that's sort of the idea of taking a theme and moving it around and finding different colors on a chord in a scale that really create a little bit of tension and finding a way to release. And so on a typical 2/5/1, people might talk to you about tritone substitutions. People might talk to you about, moving into different upper structure areas, and that's all a little bit complicated for today. But I would just say that really try to focus on playing as many themes and as many melodies as you can. Even something just a small descending pattern like. That fits perfectly on that 2/5 that I was playing. And then I might embellish that in the next phrase. Okay, so trying to keep that theme going as long as I can and maybe taking it to some new places and then resolving it. So essentially, as much as we could talk about scale degrees, flats, sharps, key centers, substitutions, all these complicated things. And I wonder if we actually have anybody who's watching who maybe isn't a musician and is a jazz appreciator that doesn't play an instrument. And I'm sure they could attest to the fact that it's not about, the number of notes that you play, the shape, the exact shape of the notes that you play, the exact, way that you articulate the notes. It's about the emotion. It's about the way that you deliver. So I could play that line just the same exact notes and rhythms, but very bland. Okay, and that's kind of eh. So it's about adding your personality behind these lines no matter what you are playing. You could be playing a whole note and you can still make it yours. You can still make it your own. You can still have feeling behind it. So I can't emphasize the importance of thematic development and melodic development enough. And that's something you can do at any level. Let's just pick a small theme. And so I touched on, shifting to different keys to create some tension and release. I touched on playing some different substitutions. I'm a big fan of chord alterations or different colors on chords. So, if I'm playing one of these lines that we mentioned, ending on the sharp 11 is something that maybe the audience doesn't expect. Or the next part of Autumn Leaves, and that's the sixth of that chord. So finding little notes in particular places that might pique the audience's interest, that might really create something new between you and the rhythm section. Lee Konitz, who recently just passed away at the beginning of the quarantine, was like a master of that. And if you study any of his contrafacts, any of his compositions, you'll see that he was a real master of just like putting these really unique, interesting colors and the most unexpected moments of a phrase, of a song form, of the beat. And so that's something I really appreciate about his writing and his playing as well. And so I wanted to touch on a great question that I was asked last week by one of our regular viewers, Anya, and she asked, how do you get yourself out of kind of feeling like you have to play everything at one time or playing the same thing every time? And so I mentioned this idea of restrictions. And I just wanted to add a little bit of information here. So I love to do this thing with my playing where I give myself a parameter. And so perhaps I'll pick a particular rhythm. Okay, so for the most part, I would try to stick to that rhythm as much as I could. But again, I didn't, just keep it cookie cutter. Right? That's not really ideal. That's not one of Chloe's funky scales that she wants to hear tonight. And so that was me really focusing on a rhythm. And maybe, maybe another time I'll focus on an interval, something like this. So this whole shape is all based on, it's just a third. And so I just kind of moved it through the chord changes there in that moment. So if you're sitting at home and you have the practice time, set your play along or your backing track or your pianist or whoever you got with you to play along with you for 10 choruses of something and challenge yourself every chorus to do something different. And you'll find that even, putting these restrictions or parameters on yourself that initially feel restricting and feel like they're limiting you actually will open you up for more creative playing that you would not have experienced otherwise. because in that one restriction, it sort of frees you to really improvise and create something that's different than what you just normally pull from, you know, in your everyday playing. So you can do this with rhythm, picking a rhythm. You can pick a particular pitch. You can pick an interval. You can pick a small motive, which I've demonstrated. You could pick a particular chord tone on every chord. You could say, I'm really going to emphasize the sharp 5 of every chord when I play. I'm going to emphasize the 3rd of every chord when I play. I mentioned extensions and colors. You could pick, you know, I'm going to emphasize sharp 11 throughout my chorus. I have a lot of students when they play the blues who constantly will improvise, you know, just for a couple of bars and then leave space for 2 bars. And play for a couple of bars, leave space for 2 bars. Play for a couple of bars, leave space for 2 bars. And what do you think I'm going to tell them? Is to add some variety into where they're leaving space. So you want to be comfortable resting for those first 2 bars and then playing and then resting and then playing, as opposed to the other way around. So you can even use this time that we have, you know, it's really, it's kind of an amazing amount of time that we have stuck at home, right? And you can use this time, listen back to your solos and say, what are my tendencies? You know, if I'm playing a rhythm changes, I always seem to start on beat 2. I never start any of my phrases on beat 4. What will it feel like if I start my phrases on beat 4? And go ahead and take a chorus, really forcing yourself with the metronome to only start on beat 4. It's another thing that Lee Konitz was a master of. He started and ended his phrases in the most unexpected places. So I hope that was a little bit of a deeper dive into the embellished 2-5-1 vocabulary that we talked about last week. And I would like to just add that one thing I love to do is, and I mentioned that I like to do, you know, some transcribing outside of my instrument, away from my instrument. You might want to write down some of these 2-5-1 lines. Write down some of these arpeggios and then just like take your eraser and take your pencil and shift things around, like mix them all up, change some octaves, add some passing notes, you know, add a big leap here and there. Just don't worry about your instrument. Don't worry about if it's playable or not. Just give yourself almost like an etude. And it could become very angular, and you'll find that it's maybe not something you would have thought about playing in your head, but it might bring you something like something a little bit more edgy, something that you wouldn't have thought of. So that's one thing I really like to do, is sort of just mix and match notes in my lines, and even just changing a line by one note or one little prefix or one little suffix can make a big difference. So I guess the bottom line is really like you have infinite potential in terms of your vocabulary and what you can create. And I think a lot of people, you know, there are some people that said that, you know, Charlie Parker had a certain number of licks that he always played. He had like 219 licks, and they calculated it and they color coded all of his solos. But just changing a line by a couple of notes, but with some things by an octave, adding a flat 9 here and there, there's infinite potential for you out there. So I hope that this is inspiring and encouraging and motivating. So our 3 takeaways in terms of wrapping up this internalizing repertoire idea are, number 1 for this week, work on your 2/5s in all 12 keys if you are not already. Number 2 is to challenge your vocabulary, challenge your first instinct by writing down your usual lines and, like I said, mixing them up, changing them up, creating new things. And then number 3 is always to focus on making melodies out of all of these things. And then I think it's time for us, Chloe, to open up to the people and see what we're up to.
Awesome, let's do it. Guys, if you would like to ask Alexa a question, please feel free, if you're in Zoom, to use that raise hand function. Just hit the participants tab at the bottom of the screen and hit the raise hand button. I will unmute you so that you can ask your question. If you feel more comfortable putting your question in the chat, I'll open that up now so that you can do that. And if you're on Facebook, there's a lot of you on Facebook now, so I would love to hear your questions. Alexa, we have a lot of people commenting where they're watching from, what time it is. 4:30 a.m.
Where?
Moscow. 3:25 a.m. in South Africa.
Oh my gosh.
Costa Rica. You got a lot of international. Italy.
Amazing. Brazil. Grazie mille. Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Definitely. All right, guys. So Please feel free to ask your questions. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. Comments, concerns, maybe not concerns.
Yeah, maybe not
questions. Don't bring your concerns here. All right, so Johnny from Facebook wants to know, what's your take on working with groove?
Hi, Johnny from Facebook. I'm assuming he means like groove, like the element of music. I don't, unless groove is like an app or something that I don't know.
I don't think it's an app.
The Groove app.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I, again, will go back to transcription here and say, you know, there are so many amazing recordings to listen to where the, you know, amazing, you know, jazz masters that came before us really have different styles of groove and where they play in the time. I mean, if you listen to even just an Art Blakey record with the Jazz Messengers, Art Blakey, you know, so many different feels, so many different styles in within all of the compositions that it really showcases being flexible and being able to play, you know, going from a poinciana to, you know, really up-tempo burner, things like that, and then to a ballad. So being able to and comfortable to play, you know, in the time and really swing on different styles like that is really important. I personally, in terms of like my style playing in time, I like to play right in time, and then I like to kind of bring things back and lay back a little bit to create a little bit of tension and release in the time. So that's another element that you can sort of take a look at and say, okay, what does it feel like to play right in time? What does it feel like to play a little bit on top of the time, which can often be uncomfortable, but it's important to know what that feels like. And what does it feel like to play behind the time? And how does that shift what's happening in terms of, you know, the relationship with all the band members? But I love to, you know, I love to just play along with people like, I mean, Cannonball Adderley, I feel like was a great example of an alto player that could just play right in there and then also would play some amazing blues lines that just stretched the time. So maybe finding people on your instrument that you really admire in terms of the way they lock in with different grooves, and then get with a drummer, play with a drummer as much as you can. I mean, obviously right now it's not ideal, but when it is safe to really focus on it. I mean, I'm like often entranced by what the drummer is doing. So I love to ask questions and see how the bass and the drums lock in together in certain grooves. So I would, you know, reach out to your peers, reach out to your friends and see what they suggest and what elements in their instruments make the groove what it is and how can you complement that. So yeah, great question, Johnny.
Great question, Johnny. All right, this next question is from Norbert, also on Facebook. And I think this is maybe good to know for some people that are doing stuff from home. He wants to know your setup.
Oh, great. Awesome. I'm sorry, what's your name again? What's his name again?
Norbert.
Okay, Norbert, how are you? Thank you for joining. I think if you're asking about my saxophone setup first, I'll just say that quickly. This is a Yamaha Custom Z. This is a Van Doren V5 A35 tip opening mouthpiece. This is a Van Doren Gold MO ligature, and these are Van Doren ZZ3 reeds and a Van Doren neck strap as well. So, and I use this similar setup on soprano too, and tenor. I try to keep things as streamlined as possible. And in terms of like working from home and playing jazz and everything from home, as I'm doing this, I have a camera, an external camera here. I'm using Zoom, and I have a little bit of an external speaker that plugs in via USB. And yeah, so that's how we're doing it.
Great. Alexa has a really cool camera and lighting setup too. I think that's another thing to mention.
Yes, I do have softbox lighting, which is what gives me my glow. Thank you.
It's good to know. All right, so we've got more coming in here from Daniel in Zoom. He asks, apart from melody, what's another way to come up with ideas when you are improvising?
Listening to the band members. So I'm going to go back to the drummer. I will often pick up rhythms and little themes and motives from the drummer actually, because it's not, you know, you don't want to be the person that's doing like playing exact copycat with someone. Like if you hear the pianist comp and go, "La, da, da," you don't want to go la la, you know, and totally like regurgitate what everybody's doing. You want to do something that says like, I heard you and I'm commenting on what you just played. And so for me, when I hear a drummer play or emphasize a certain rhythm, I feel like it's a little bit less like really like copycatty, kind of on your tail to play. I'll take that rhythm, maybe stretch it a little bit, and make something out of it. And I also like to listen to the bass player and see where is he or she in terms of their range. If the bass player is like playing low in the range, I'll try to complement by going up higher. I think I may have mentioned this before for anybody who was with me last week, and vice versa. If they're up high in their register, I'll try to go lower in mine. And with the pianist, that's another great way to kind of pick up little ideas and motives. So I often, I think in a quartet setting, I play in small group and in quartet and quintet a lot of the time, we're just kind of tossing things. It's like a melting pot of just like all these themes and rhythms that people are picking from. And it's not just in that one moment, you know, a theme or a melody doesn't just dissolve after it's being played. It stays with you through the whole entire song. And so, yeah, that's, I mean, I love to do that. And then I also sometimes will get kind of nerdy and even just think of certain numbers or intervals. So I'll think of, you know, right now I'm really excited about the interval of a sixth, or, oh, I haven't played the intervals, I haven't thought about fourths in a while. And so I might play something that challenges me and can try to shape something in sixths for a little bit of a while. And if you think of like, if you give yourself a number pairing, like 4, 6, 5, or something like that, and every chord that you see, if you kind of pick out the fourth and the sixth and the fifth, these are just ways to kind of generate some ideas in your mind. So I hope that helps.
Definitely. Thanks for your question, Daniel. All right, this next question comes from Jazz Lincoln Center's own Madeline Gardner.
Okay.
Madeline has a fun question for you. She wants to know, what was the first song you ever learned how to play on the sax? And bonus question, what is your go-to karaoke song?
Amazing. I appreciate these questions. Thank you, Madeline Gardner. If you guys don't already know Madeline, she is the woman rocking the Wednesdays with the Winton, Wednesdays at 12:30 with the occasional slight time change.
Yes.
She crushes it. Thank you, Madeline. Also rocking social media. Um, my first song that I learned, ooh, I think it might have been like, I mean, besides the usual hot cross buns, which is a fan favorite, um, I loved Blue Moon. Blue Moon, you saw me standing alone. Not to be confused, that's not my karaoke song, but that's, you know, a good old classic. So I think I learned that on piano and saxophone like very early on. Um, and I think my karaoke song would be I'm Every Woman by Shaka Khan, or September by Earth, Wind and Fire, or That's the Way of the World by Earth, Wind and Fire, or Love on Top by Beyonce. So if anybody wants to go to karaoke or do virtual karaoke, I am prepared. Thank you.
Great. It sounds like you and Madeline and myself have a date when this is all over.
Beautiful. Perhaps episode 8 next week.
Yes, absolutely. It's a date. All right, let's get back to the questions.
Great.
This next question comes from Joel. Joel on Facebook says, hello. What tip opening do you recommend to work articulations in a comfortable way with a big sound?
Nice, nice. We're getting real into the technical stuff. I love it. Okay, Joel from Facebook. I gotta say, I like this tip of opening on my Van Doren. This is the A35. Van Doren also makes A25 and A45, I believe. So this is the middle of the road. I think middle of the road, not too extreme is best. So not too open, not too closed. Because sometimes I think if things are a little bit too closed, it can get a little stifling, and then if things are too open, things can get a little like floundering. So those are not adjectives that I love for myself. But it just depends. It depends what's comfortable for you, and also your reed and mouthpiece combination makes a huge difference as well. But I vote middle of the road. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Joel. All right, we've got lots coming in, so we're going to try to get to everybody, you guys. Thank you for
Wow,
sending your questions. All right. Let's see. All right.
Anybody asking about my
I know.
my genie lamp that I have tonight? Nobody's asking. You get 3 wishes, people. 3 wishes.
All right. This question is from Francisco. He asks, any tips on books or arranging? Sorry, any tips or books on arranging that you can recommend?
Absolutely. So I studied composition. My composition class was at the Eastman School of Music with Bill Dobbins, and he has a great book called A Linear Approach to Composition and Arranging by Bill Dobbins, Dobbins. There's also a very good Raymond Wright composition book, which he was the composition teacher at Eastman a long time ago. Ray Wright. Now I cannot remember the name of it, but I'm gonna find it and I will add it to the chat here and see what I can find. But otherwise,
Minnie says she thinks Inside the Score. Yeah.
Yes, Inside the Score. Thank you, Minnie. Who was that? Minnie. Thank you.
Minnie. Yeah.
Minnie. Thank you. Inside the Score, and yeah. Those are the 2 that we used. So hope that helps.
Great. Thanks for your question. All right. This question comes from Joshua. He says, I feel like I can transcribe and develop different lines for 2-5-1s, but I tend to struggle with studying jazz language, more specifically bebop, on something like a 4-chord or a 6-chord or diminished. How do I work on this?
And sorry, say his name one more time, Chloe.
Joshua.
Joshua. Hi, Joshua. Great question. I feel like I'm in like a jazz therapy appointment right now. I love it. It's like, how do I strengthen my 6th chord? So Joshua, let's talk. Let's see. In terms of adding bebop language on, I mean, I will practice diatonic bebop lines in every key. So here's a really great little line, for example. Okay, so this is just outlining a major 7. I actually was taught that little lick by my saxophone teacher in high school, Larry DeVore, and if you're watching, big shout out to you. And so that's just a small, like a little bit of a nugget of information, like a little bebop line. So I would use that if I'm playing Autumn Leaves. I would use that on the 4th measure, for example, of Autumn Leaves, which is the 4 chord. And that fits kind of over the 1 chord, or and there I just outlined a little bit more. And I'll give you one more. Or something like that, like kind of plugging those little nuggets in on some of those chords. So I think if you're looking at the 4 chord, if you're looking at the 6 chord, I mean 6 chord voice leading all the way. Take a look at where you're coming from and where you're going to. That's, I think, kind of really what it depends on, which is like a big jazz therapy lesson right now. Where are you coming from and where are you going? But if you look at the chord that you're kind of struggling with, what notes can lead you into there and what notes can lead you out of there? If you're looking at the 6 chord in a blues, right? That was just an outline of the 6 chord there. So I would say check out that voice leading, get really comfortable playing as much kind of diatonic bebop language as you can. I mentioned that's the type of language that you might find in the Charlie Parker Omni book solos, those famous bebop solos, those little prefixes and suffixes. Or just these little kind of twists and turns that make things feel a little bit more linear. So that was a big question, and yeah, hope I answered.
Yeah, great question. Okay, cool. So we have a fun conversation going on Facebook about if you have a Amazon Echo and if you have called her Alexa.
I'm loving these side chats. I think I we need to do like a pre-concert, like a pre-well-rounded musician, like what's going on? Okay, I absolutely am against all of these devices, I have to say. Really sorry. I was so bummed when they came out with Alexa, because when my mom and dad named me Alexa, like nobody was named Alexa. It was Billy Joel's daughter and that was it. And I was like not worried about that. You know, I didn't think we were going to be going to school together. So that was it. And now here I am. Everyone's asking me the weather. Everyone's asking me to order takeout. Everyone's saying, Alexa, what's this? Alexa, what's this? And I'm like, you know what? No, I don't think so. So it's been not good over here. And if anyone's gonna have me over in their homes post-COVID, we're gonna have to change to Echo. We're gonna have to change the names before I get there.
There's your answer, everyone.
Yes.
All right.
You heard it here first.
All right, here's a question from Chris. You've talked a bit about this. He asks, or she, do you have any tips for transcribing away from the horn and how to develop that skill?
Yes, Chris. Yes, I definitely have talked about this. That is a great question. So I often, you know, if I need to, I'll use my horn to get like the first couple notes of a solo and the last couple notes of a solo, and then I'll put it away and I'll have to go figure it out. And oftentimes I'll just be sketching, you know, in the beginning when I started doing this, I was just plugging in. I often would write pitchless stems. So I might know that there was a measure of eighth notes and I just put slashes for the eighth notes because I didn't know all the pitches, and slowly but surely would be plugging things in, as it takes a lot of singing first and then kind of okay, that's a fourth, bum, 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 and finding out what he or she is doing in their solo and the shape that they're taking, maybe coming back to the horn for a little bit, going back just to not using it, trial and error, and getting really comfortable with intervals, just lots and lots of intervals, being able to sing them, being able to play them. I tell all my students it's really important to practice all your scales in seconds, thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, sevenths, and octaves. So hopefully that will help get your ears geared up.
Great. Thanks for your question, Chris. He says, or she says, perfect. Thank you. All right. This question is from Jed on Facebook. Jed asks, who was a musician you were really excited to play with and what was it like?
Ooh. Well, I can go with the hometown crowd. I can definitely say Wynton Marsalis. I actually, if any of you watched the Essentially Ellington virtual festival that we just had a couple weeks ago that Chloe was video producing, that was the 25th anniversary of the Essentially Ellington Festival and competition, and that was one of my first experiences as a high schooler. And I just loved it, and I just knew from that moment that I wanted to be a professional. Well, I had known I wanted to be a professional jazz musician, but it was in that moment that I was like, okay, I can do this. Before I knew that Amazon was going to make a device using my name and ruin everything. And so, yeah, I never would have ever have thought that I would ever get the opportunity to play with Wynton, but I just have been very, very lucky, very grateful, and sort of reconnected with Jazz at Lincoln Center and Wynton, and with the help of some really like great friends in terms of helping me to get started in New York and get set up and meet people and put myself in the right places. That was really a great experience. I think it was actually, I had decided after being in New York for a couple of years freelancing to apply for my master's at the Juilliard School. And I was really nervous because I wasn't sure like if it was right for me to get my master's and what I wasn't sure. And I did the audition and I made it through the rounds, you know, all day, long day, made it through all the rounds. And I remember calling my parents and saying, I don't know I'm not sure if I'll get in, maybe. I mean, it would be nice, but I don't know. And then I got home and I got a call from Eric Wright, who was working in the touring concerts and touring department then, and he said, "Are you available to do 2 weeks, sub for 2 weeks with Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra?" And I was like, "Oh!" And so that was after my Juilliard audition. So I think that was a big one to answer your question.
Yeah, I think if you guys want to watch, we've just posted a concert from the vault. I believe it's Jazz Lincoln Center plays Ella, right? Alexis.
Oh yeah.
Alexis subbing in that show, and it's a fun one.
Exactly. That that was that time.
All right, great. This next question is from Cynthia in Seattle. Hi, Cynthia in Seattle. She asks, how do you approach the piano? What do you practice on it, and how do you work it into your routine?
Thanks for watching, Cynthia. Cynthia's a friend of mine and an awesome saxophonist, so I appreciate you sticking with me on this episode. But awesome question. So I started on piano, but I sort of put it away towards high school because I decided to focus more on saxophone. So my approach to piano in the last 5-ish years has really been in a just kind of more functional way. I really want to be able to comp for students that are learning tunes, and be comfortable playing things like blue bossa, or be comfortable playing things like rhythm changes in whatever key, and really like C or whatever it is that might have a little bit of a groove or require some left hand independence, might require sort of something other than just your standard block chord piano playing. That's sort of my goal, is to just be cool with that. So that's what I will play. I'll play through the tunes that I'm working on just to test myself if I'm, working on even like more advanced tunes or whatever, like Coltrane tunes or something. That just helps to kind of put the tune in a different context and take it out of my alto ears. And so sometimes I'll come up with new improvisational material that way. I'll kind of be like, oh yeah, I didn't quite hear that relationship before. So I don't spend a ton of time shedding on piano, I have to admit, Cynthia, but I think for now I just kind of like to use it functionally in that way. Sort of helps me to rekindle like that little kid feeling of enjoying and playing music. Sometimes if I'm practicing saxophone too much, it can get to feel a little bit more like study or like work. So piano helps to take me out of that, and I also use it in composing, and I'll just kind of plunk out a chord with the pedal and experiment with different colors and extensions and drones, putting a drone in the left hand and finding some new things in the right. So that's basically what I do.
Great. Thank you, Cynthia. Okay, this question is from Les. We know Les. He asks, how would you approach learning very complex tunes? Conception, skippy, confirmation, by ear or reading as well?
So good question, Les. For more advanced tunes, I definitely always recommend learning the melody by ear as much as possible. I don't recommend using apps like Amazing Slowdowner and all that stuff that some of my students ask me about. I just prefer to really chip away in time and figure it out. So I think, that's like what I would have done at the time for like confirmation or something like Ciora. And sorry, you do probably hear a little bit of a dog barking in the background here. And in terms of learning the harmony, again, I go back to the bass line, something like giant steps, boom, 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 and really being able to play that as much as I can, just ad nauseum. Just really being able to outline it and hear that and feel that without feeling tied, so that when I'm improvising, I don't feel tied to it. With those more advanced tunes, though, I probably would have either, I think in those times, like we were really using Aebersold books. I don't know if that's like still the popular thing, but I was learning a lot of my tunes from then. I would probably have preferred to have learned them by ear, but things like confirmation and with all of that theoretical study in terms of bebop, I don't think it's a crime to have a lead sheet. But melody, I definitely emphasize to learn by ear.
Great, thank you, Les. All right, guys, it's about 5 to 10. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you for joining us. Thank you to Alexa. Please make sure to join us again for more sessions of The Well-Rounded Musician. We also have a ton of other live events that we're hosting for free throughout the coming weeks. We've got masterclasses, concerts, lessons, interactive conversations, performances, and more. We'll be back next week with a new episode of The Well-Rounded Musician with Alexa. And as she mentioned earlier, we're going to switch it up a bit, and this time she'll be in conversation with a special guest. So feel free to follow us on social media and keep up with us on the website jazz.org. thanks again to everybody for being a part of this community. It really means a lot to see your faces every week on these, on Alexa's show and on the masterclasses and on Skane's domain. It really makes our week. If it's within your means, please consider making a donation. Jazz at Lincoln Center is a nonprofit organization, and we are committed to entertaining, enriching, and expanding a global community for jazz, but we cannot do that without your support. So contributions of any amount are extremely meaningful. And to our supporters and donors, we cannot thank you enough. Again, just follow us on Facebook, Jazz at Lincoln Center, and Instagram and Twitter at jazz.org. That's jazz.org spelled out. That's it for my spiel. I'll turn it over to Alexa to see if we might be able to get in a last question.
Yeah.
I think we can do it.
Yeah, baby.
All right. Lewis asks, if you didn't play alto, what else would you play? What would be your favorite brass instrument or other instrument?
My favorite brass instrument. Ooh, I don't think I would do brass. I think I would play cello. No offense, brass is just a lot, okay? But I would probably play cello or maybe French horn because it's such a challenge. And I'm fascinated with I'm fascinated with French horn. And also it's like not so bad to carry. So that's important.
Cool. And then a final question is, what are your 3 wishes for the genie?
Oh, who asked this question?
This is from Virgil, but I also want to know. From Virgil and from Chloe.
Okay, you guys, yeah. This is I'm at my parents' house helping them move, and so this is this is my little well-rounded genie tonight. My 3 wishes are for everybody to stay safe, for everyone to stay healthy, and for you all to tune in next week for episode 8.
That was amazing.
Thank you.
All right, send us home, Alexa.
All right, guys, here's my spiel. So the 3 takeaways from today. Number 1, begin working on your 2 5s in all 12 keys, or keep working on them if you already are. Challenge your vocabulary, write out different exercises, change up your lines, change things around, and challenge what you already know. And number 3 is continue the focus on making melodies. So Chloe has dropped in very smoothly a link here in the chat. This is alexatarantino.com/gift. I was doing free downloads. I have to do another one, but this one is my 10 ways to practice smarter. If you have not already downloaded it, I know it's been the same one for a while, but if you're new, go ahead and sign up for that. It'll go right to your inbox. And if you already are getting my downloads, then you'll be getting them in your email as they come. So I think we had a couple of questions about if I teach lessons and stuff. So here's also my Linktree link, which I think if you click, you'll get a ton of information. Like I have a new record out. I have an online summer jazz camp with pianist Stephen Feifke starting next week. And actually our guest artists for the workshop are Jeff Coffin, Sherry Miracle, Cecile McLaurin-Salvant, Wynton Marsalis, and more. We have all these people coming in to do guest artist Q&As. So that is actually, I'll put it here, that is at astepaheadjazz.com. The program is called Summer Jazz Online, and it's all online. It's all in your slippers from home. So that would be really fun to see you all there. And go ahead and click the link tree if you're curious about lessons or anything else. And thank you for asking. I appreciate it. So thanks, Chloe. Thanks all for watching. See you next week for a special guest. We're going to kind of shake things up with the next several rounds of Well-Rounded Musician, take things in a new direction. I think it's about time. You guys have been hearing a lot from me. While I do have my new genie tonight, it's always good to get new perspectives from other people. So we'll see what happens.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Alexa. We will see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.